Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2016 Nonprofit Leadership Development Webinar Series. This session here in April, we're focusing on productivity, critical issue for anyone in a work situation or having to balance multiple aspects of your life, and certainly critical within the nonprofit sector and for those who are demonstrating leadership within that world. So thank you for joining us here today for this webinar. If you are hearing an echo, consider checking your equipment to make sure that if you're listening on the phone and your speakers are on, you may need to turn off those speakers or change the microphone settings. Also would encourage you to close the door if you have that opportunity so that you can minimize the disruptions for folks and give them a signal that you are investing in your learning here this afternoon. And would also encourage you, if you have your Outlook program or your mail program still turned on, to turn that off so that the interruptions don't come through, something that we'll actually discuss here in our webinar series related to productivity and how we can continue to promote that within our organizations and for ourselves. So I am Melanie Schmidt, president of Timpano Consulting, and have had the opportunity to do consulting for nonprofits and other organizations for over 20 years, focusing on how we can identify ways for people to recharge and refocus in order to make great progress in becoming more efficient and more effective and moving beyond business as usual. Have worked across sectors, so I'm experienced in finding efficiencies and promoting productivity in organizations of all sizes, from small grassroots startups to international organizations with thousands of employees and multiple types of units. So I've had a lot of experience in finding new solutions, and the opportunity that we have here today is to provide some good tips, techniques, and best practices that really apply for individuals. So you'll be able to use that as you move forward. Would encourage you today as well to think about what is the one thing that you were hoping to learn with the topic of promoting productivity. Even go so far as to jot that down on a sheet of paper in front of you. And then at the end of our webinar here today, we'll leave some time to make sure that you can reflect and ensure that you got an answer to that question or had that nugget raised for you. And if not, that will be an opportunity to use that chat feature through the webinar process and get that information. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Today's discussion, we'll talk about fostering productivity at various levels because as you're sitting here today and signing up for this series, a nonprofit leadership development series, looking to be that nonprofit leader, to be developing and expanding and growing in your own capacity to serve as a leader, really remembering that you should be thinking about this discussion through the frame or through the lens of being a role model. One of the really critical aspects, particularly when it comes to productivity, is being very aware of your own practices and being reflective, taking time to think about how are you exemplifying the productivity skills that you would like to see in your organization, among your colleagues and peers, or perhaps among your staff, if you're in that sort of a position. And so again, that mindfulness comes into play of being open, being aware, really lacking judgment about things that may have happened in the past, and finding new pathways to become more productive and to promote that productivity on an ongoing basis. We're also going to spend some time today talking about accountability and making accountability more visible. For productivity goes hand in hand with accountability because it's about setting clear expectations, managing those expectations, and making sure that you're moving through processes and systems in a way that you can attend to various components. And with that, we'll start into promoting productivity. So when we think about promoting productivity as a nonprofit leader, we have an opportunity to do that through three lenses, or in three different buckets, if you will. The first is to think about promoting productivity for yourself, so on a very personal level. And today we'll spend some time going through a variety of different techniques that may be useful to you in promoting your own productivity and can become techniques that you can model for others, you can share with others, and you can even then incorporate with your teams or for your organization in different ways. And so knowing that really it does start at that individual level. And once you've got a handle about what that means, you've gone through your own self-reflection and renewal, then you also start to look at promoting productivity for the teams with which you're engaged. And this may be at a peer level, it could be at a leadership level as well. And with that, it's starting to bring in the different dynamics of the team and the opportunities, the personalities, the working styles, the clarity of intent and charter for that team, and really figuring out how to move that team forward in the best possible way. So that when you're able to think about it on a personal level, explore it on a team level, then you're also able to really move productivity forward at an organizational level. And for true holistic satisfaction and reward, remembering that attending to all three of these areas is ultimately incredibly important. For if we see that we can achieve success and find that productivity on a personal level, yet we're seeing it lacking in either a team or an organizational forum, it can be dissonant for people and create that confusion or that underlying frustration that at the end of the day diminishes our individual effectiveness. So again, really thinking about it on all three levels. In the same way that if you have an organizational intent to promote productivity as an organization and to move things forward, that requires the leadership in the organization to attend to that team productivity and the personal productivity so that people are able to operate with their whole selves and through all of their skills in the best possible way. So we want you, as you set up the stage here for some of the techniques that we'll share and some of the ideas that we hope to spark, is again remembering that personal productivity, team productivity, and organizational productivity. And to break that down a little bit more, we're going to spend a bit of time thinking about productivity sort of beyond productivity as usual, and created a table as a reference. And we'll first step through it at a personal level, then move to that team perspective, and then the organizational perspective. And as you can see laid out here, we're really thinking about productivity through a variety of different lenses and thinking about what is the avenue that we have as an individual to really extend and promote productivity. What are the means by which we can move our desires for greater productivity forward? What's the typical view that we have for that productivity? What makes the most sense from a time-bound perspective? And what's the approach that we need to consider when we think about promoting productivity? What is the emphasis that we have when we think about productivity? Where are we emphasizing our energy or our attention? And then what does that actual promoting productivity hinge on? And so with the personal example, what you can see here is thinking about the avenue for promoting productivity as an individual is truly to take control of the things that seem like they are dominating your mind space, taking up your time. And often this will revolve around technology. One of the examples that we can use is, are you controlling your technology, or is your technology controlling you? And at a very personal level, we do have control over our decisions, over our actions, over our thoughts. And so we need to embrace that and move forward and to begin to act in that fashion. And that's also where the mindfulness techniques can be useful, to being very aware and spending some time to just to sit and see what brings you that anxiety? What are the ideas or the concerns that are driving past you as you're simply trying to become grounded in becoming more productive? So that when you can create a mindset of taking control of your situation and of your actions, then you start to look for various techniques as the means by which to become more productive. And we'll spend some time later in the webinar this morning or this afternoon talking through a few techniques that you can try out. And a critical aspect when we think about having these means available to us to become more productive is that we can also become overwhelmed by techniques. There are so many different ideas floating around, so many things that people are telling us to do to be more productive. And that's again where we need to exert our control, own our power in that situation, and find a few that we're going to try, we'll experiment with, and then perhaps adapt differently or leave behind us and try something else. Because what we're going to do is take control through those techniques and to think about the progress we're making in our productivity on more of a weekly basis. And so at a personal level, you really are looking at how can I be more productive in the short term? And so that might be, how can I be more productive over the next hour? How can I be more productive over the next day, few days? But keeping it within the concept of the week can be helpful because it allows you to really build on successes and do some assessments that allow you to create your own approach to promoting productivity. Because with that approach to personal productivity, it comes down to practice and thinking about what are the things I'm going to try? How can I create a routine in this practice that I'm creating of productivity? And how can that routine be something that is energizing and inspiring to me as opposed to something that turns me into a robot or makes me feel like I'm really, again, not in control, but giving up that control to the process. And so personal productivity is about practicing things and adapting things, trying new things. And in doing that, you're placing your emphasis on tasks. And so it's really thinking about things that you can do. And a big part of that is because what do we know about being in a work situation, and certainly being in most nonprofit organizations, is that there is a lot to get done. And we have a finite amount of time, and we really should be creating better boundaries for ourselves and for our colleagues about what needs to be done, what tasks need to be completed on a near-term scale, so that we can hinge on commitment to making progress and commitment to being in control, trying new techniques, reflecting on a very short-term basis, and practicing things to get tasks done. And so if we think about it, that's walking through from really a personal productive lens. And then we move into the team consideration. And for teams, the avenue for creating greater productivity in a team is really being able to demonstrate clarity. And that clarity comes when we think about what are the roles of the people on the team? Who is in this team setting to do what? What are the clear responsibilities that each individual on the team will have? And that's really critical because when we're clear about the roles and responsibilities for the team, we can become more productive because we can identify the handoffs that need to happen, either between actions that are occurring, thoughts that come up, expertise that's on the team. But if you're not clear in those roles and responsibilities, it's really hard for the team to become grounded and to click and understand the strengths that people are being on the team to contribute, as well as the specific outcomes that you're hoping to achieve. And so by demonstrating clarity for the team, you're putting them on the path for greater productivity. And in order to do that and to have success, the means of becoming more productive is all about continuity. And with the continuity piece, it's also about not being willy-nilly about who's in what role or what their responsibilities are, and being very respectful of those roles and responsibilities, such that if you're working on a team project, you happen to be walking down the hall, one of the directors or the executive director is coming down the hall toward you, and they stop and ask about and throw an idea your way about what that team could be doing or how it's working on it, or they have a question. Being mindful of productivity would suggest that what you should do is alert that person, even the person of authority, to say, I'm really glad you're interested in our project. That sounds like something that Sally's been working on for us. And so I'm going to talk with her about that and have her get back to you. And so what you're doing in that moment is acknowledging the contribution and focus of your teammate and also demonstrating continuity of respect for the roles and responsibilities at play. And so having that continuity at the forefront is critical from an external communications perspective. It's also important because you can create the means of continuity by how you structure your team interactions. And so another way of looking at promoting productivity in a team is being clear about what we're going to accomplish with each and every meeting and with every interaction. What's the progress that we're looking to see between now and our next meeting? And so again, bringing in that mindfulness and being reflective and respectful and bringing in those productive or meaningful meeting techniques go a long way to helping a team achieve clarity and continuity. And with the view for team productivity, to think about that as more of a monthly view. So while there may be things that you're doing on a daily basis and on a weekly basis, really the productivity view for a team is a bit more long-term because they're in it for a longer period of time. There's often things that they need to do outside of those direct team interactions, so that often folks will come back together on that monthly basis. And so to think about it on team productivity is less about the day-to-day and more about the week-to-week leading into a monthly review. And the approach that you take for achieving that clarity and continuity is to ensure that you are thinking through the processes that the team is going to use to become more productive. And so with that, with roles, who's leading the meetings, who's taking the minutes or writing the summary, who's really in charge of driving progress or checking in with people and holding them accountable? What is the structure of the meeting? What are the decision rights? All sorts of opportunities that you have to ensure that clarity through process and to ensure documentation of that process. A beautiful opportunity with teams is to ensure that you have that team charter or that scope document that identifies who's on the team, what their roles are, what the responsibilities are, how frequently you're going to meet, what your intended outcomes are, what the milestones might be. Because in the team, your productivity, the emphasis is really on activities. These are the things that have to get done, but they typically involve multiple people. And so there are actions that together will move your project forward. And all of that hinges on coordination and really understanding how are we coordinating resources among the team and within the organization so that we can become more productive, achieve our outcomes more efficiently, and hopefully have some additional time so that you can be engaging in more reflective work for yourself and for your organization. And so you can see that that team starts to move things into a bit different perspective and through a different lens, all of which benefits from the personal productivity gains that you can make by taking control through techniques and commitment. So then if we move forward, if we think about it from an organizational perspective, the avenue for organizational productivity is through purpose. If we're promoting the organization's purpose, the organization's mission, what we intend to do in our community and for the populations we serve, it provides people with strong parameters and a clear focus as a means to become more productive. Because when we know what we're doing, what we're all about, it allows us to make better decisions about how we're going to spend our resources, be they time, money, our intellectual resource, or just our overall commitments to self. And so from an organizational perspective, promoting that purpose through focus and looking at that on a more annual basis. And for some organizations, it's that quarter by quarter view and then leading up to that annual progress that you might be making. And so again, with this, thinking a little even longer term, organizational productivity is not about turning a ship overnight. That's personal productivity. Your team productivity can move it a few degrees more, but organizationally, you have to accept and embrace that it takes time in order to accomplish things in organizations of all sizes and of all types and all personalities. So again, having that annual view and approaching your productivity more through systems. So at this point, it's what are the systems that we have in place so that our productivity is sustainable. So this might go beyond just documenting certain processes, but then connecting those processes with information technology or with other group dynamics or meeting situations, so that you have created this living and breathing system that's helping you create things that are repetitive, obtainable, and sustainable over time. Because an organizational productivity, again, remember, is that longer term annual focus on purpose. And so your emphasis is much more at a policy level when you're thinking about organizational productivity. And at that emphasis of policy is really where you want to make sure that the behaviors that you're hoping to call out and reinforce at a personal level, how you're expecting people to spend their time and complete their tasks, are reflected in the policies that the organization is putting in place. And so for productivity, this might involve policies around flex time, or it might involve policies around remote access. It could involve policies around training and development. The various aspects of how people work together and how we grow our own talents really is critical in promoting that organizational productivity. And it really hinges on communication. And that is clear, consistent, constant, coordinated communication. Not just, we are going to say we're going to become more productive and then expect everyone to remember it. Organizational productivity is about keeping people informed and involved and aware of changing dynamics in their landscape. This is an area where many organizations have great opportunities to enhance their internal communication. We often will make an assumption that people know everything that we're doing because we know it so well. And what we know and what research continues to demonstrate is that people don't know what's happening in their own organizations, and they really can't be expected to know everything. And so creating internal chat boards or electronic newsletters, a really well-functioning intranet or internal web space is really important to promoting that purpose so that people can feel like they have that sense of connection and clarity, so ultimately they have some control. So at this point, I would encourage everyone, I know this is a lot of information to be digesting in a short period of time. So also encourage you, if you have questions that come up throughout our conversation this afternoon, or specific aspects that are in need of clarification or you're curious about, feel free to use that chat function and pop questions into me. They should come into the presenter so that we can see everything that's happening there. So again, use that chat function so we can make sure to clarify as we go through. So I wanted to share that way of looking at productivity at all three levels for the organization, from a personal, team, and organizational perspective. And with those distinctions, we want to move into some personal productivity tools. So these are things that I would encourage you to find at least one that might work for you. Try it out, share this information with your colleagues, and serve as a role model for those personal productivity tools. So what we'll step through are a few different ideas. One is to pace your priorities, and we'll talk through what that acronym means. Encourage you to respect your rhythm and your own biorhythms and natural energy points. Break it down. One of the things we know is that when it comes to being overwhelmed, we just need to find a way to take that great big thing and put it into individual bite-sized pieces. We will talk about managing your mail. What is the one thing that we hear over and over again is when it comes to productivity, we love email and we hate email all at the same time. And then we'll also discuss personal productivity relating to check-ins and check-outs. And so starting with pacing your priorities, this is an adaptation of a Lean Six Sigma tool that helps in terms of prioritizing projects. And this is adapted to think about the very tasks that accumulate in your life on a daily basis. So at the personal productivity level, one of the opportunities that you would have is to look at your week and create that long laundry list of all of the things, all of the tasks that you want to complete over the course of that week. And when you have the entire list, you can number them or put letters in front of them, whichever is easier for you to remember. And then to really think about each individual task that you've identified and put it on is it on a scale of, and create your own, whatever works best for you, 1 to 4, 1 to 10. How easy is this to do versus how hard is this to do, and give it a number. And then do the same thing when you think about that individual task and the payback that will result when you complete it. And so this is really an opportunity to quickly examine each task that you want to accomplish over the course of the week based upon your perception of how hard it's going to be, what sort are you going to have to invest, and what are you going to get in terms of a return. And so essentially, if you're doing that on a sort of easy to do, hard to do, so easy being 1, hard being, say, 10, payback, small being 1, large being 10, you're also creating then categories. So within that, if it's easy to do and you've given it, say, a 2 on an easy to do scale, that will put it in more of that plan action column. And then if you look at it and say, oh, but I just don't think the payback is going to be that big on this, it would put it down into that action box. And when you have the action box, what you can then do is get all of those lists into a box, into a category, and then really do one final assessment to say, all right, I see that I have 3 things in my action box, 4 things to plan, 3 things to consider, and 10 things to evaluate. What does that mean for me this week? Well, it means that your action items could be the things you do first, or you know that they're the things they aren't going to take much to do, so you can fill in your week with those items. If you need a break, you're working on a project that you're planning because it falls into that quadrant, and you just need to kind of step away for a while, those action items can be great ways to give yourself a productivity mental boost and just get it done. There are also things that then will fall into that evaluate bucket. And these are the items that in a traditional project prioritization, you would eliminate. But what we know from a personal productivity perspective is that you don't always have the option to eliminate things. And so you have to evaluate, do I need to go back and talk with someone about eliminating this? Do I have the decision rights within myself to just eliminate it? Or is it something, it might be hard to do and it's not going to have much payback, but I have to do it anyway. And then you figure out where you can fit that into your week so that you don't procrastinate it and not get it done. And so the consider those hard to do, large paybacks, those are the items that, again, you're going to think about, do I really have the capacity to accomplish that task this week? And it may, again, be an opportunity where you need to go back to someone and talk with them about all of the work that's on your plate for the week and let them know this needs to shift out 1 more week. Or can we talk about bringing in some additional resources to help me get this done? And so within each of those areas, it's a really great opportunity for you to take that laundry list of tasks and prioritize them very quickly. And then it is true to cross them off can feel so wonderful. So use that pacing technique, plan, action, consider, and evaluate to evaluate your own task list on a weekly and then daily basis. You can adjust it. So that's pacing your priorities. Another personal productivity tool stems from some research that it was done at Duke, and that had to do with when we are in our own natural rhythms. And the research that was done indicated that we all have 2 super productive hours every day. And what we tend to do with our super productive hours is to not notice them. And so some of the things that will happen when we don't notice when we're more productive is we'll fill it in with things, or it gets taken over by things. And so if we're going to take control for our promoting our own personal productivity, what we need to be aware of is, when do we have our high energy? And what the research has shown on this is, in fact, that most people, that is within 2 hours of waking up in the morning. So after fully awakening in the morning. So for some, this might be a few hours after you have your first 2, 4, 7 cups of coffee. But really looking at it, this tends to be fully awake, and then 2 hours after that point, people are really prepared to think well and to be very active and engaged. And what often happens in those first 2 hours, that's when we're on social media. That's when we're checking our email. That's when we're really figuring out our project list for the day. And some of those things really don't require a high cognitive capacity. And so if we could reshape our day to find those 2 hours and really capitalize on them, we can become that much more productive. And so what that might mean is that you actually do your to-do list and your review of that in the middle of the day. Perhaps it's right before lunch or after lunch, where you then come back to your desk and, all right, what have I done today? What do I need to do? And you've used those precious 2 hours in the morning for some of those items that might have been on your plan or consider list from pacing your priorities. And one of the things to be aware that while the research shows most people, this is in the morning, that is not true for everyone. So night owls do exist. And also, like, late afternoon can be another really productive time, particularly for people in a work setting. And so one of the other opportunities that you have, if you think about this from a team perspective, is to really gather information from your teammates about when they're at their best. So that if you're having a brainstorming meeting with your team and you know that the majority of people are really firing on all cylinders between 9 and 11 a.m., great time to hold that meeting. Don't put it in that 1 to 3 p.m. slot where you know that everyone's at their lowest energy. And so when you're able to seize those opportunities, to do that whenever you can. And so gathering that information from your team and being very aware of that can be important. And it can also be important from a team perspective when you think about supporting your colleagues, where you may not be interacting with them specifically on a project team, but being respectful of the fact that you know that Joe's most productive hours are from 3 to 5 p.m. And so those might be the times when you let Joe do Joe's work, rather than interrupting and coming in with perhaps some issues that you need to take care of. So just being very, again, aware of your own high cognitive times as well as those of your colleagues. Great way to really get a boost into your personal and team productivity. Another opportunity that you have is a technique that allows you to really find your focus and find your flow. And this is a technique that is called the Pomodoro technique. On the slide, you can see the Pomodoro timer, and it was actually a time management method that was developed in the late 1980s. And the kitchen timer is up there because that was the tomato-shaped kitchen timer that the professor used to come up with this technique. And so really the underlying premise is that we are more productive when we can become more mentally agile. And to become more agile, we need to have more frequent breaks. And so what the Pomodoro technique would ask you to do is to identify the task that's in front of you, to set your timer, and traditionally that's in the body of work has been 25 minutes. And so to set your timer for 25 minutes, and focus on the task that you've identified. And so you're going to just do the work. What we know is that sometimes when we try and focus, our own mind will interrupt us with things. And when that happens, write down what came to mind that you want to do. Write it down, put it aside, and go back to your task. And so that for those 25 minutes, you are focused on the task at hand. And when your timer goes off, make a mark on the sheet of paper, perhaps on the mark where you've written down that thought that interrupted you, and then take a 3-minute break. And it might be you stand up, do a quick stretch, do some breathing, walk around the hallway, but come back after that 3 minutes, set your timer, and work on the task. And the Pomodoro technique suggests that you would do that for a total of 4 times. And so when you think about this, this is a great technique when there are things that are going to require you to really buckle down and take a half a day to think through something or get it done, or to do, writing that grant that needs to happen, or answering or critiquing, Q&A process, creating the new outcomes logic model. Again, something that's going to take a period of time. And again, what this isn't doing is having you focus, take a mental break, focus, take a mental break. Focus, take a mental break, focus one more time, and assess your progress. And the key for this is also to know that low tech is best. So the whole goal to this, and if you actually can do it, for some people, the ticking of a timer is actually useful in the process. And again, this is where you have to be aware of your own responses to things. For some, that could become a bit obsessive, but you need something that will give you a ring, because you need that mental jar to pull out, set it aside, and then come back to it. So this is a great way to think about things that require concentrated development. So that is finding your focus and flow with the Pomodoro technique. I did say we would talk about email. And the critical thing about managing your email, you will hear tons of ideas about how email should be managed. And at the end of the day, it's really a personal choice. And a big part of that does revolve around the role that you play within your organization. And so this is something where we've had a lot of discussions. One of the techniques that is encouraged is for people to only check their email twice a day. And for some, the challenge has been, well, but I serve in an administrative support role. And so part of what I need to know is when someone needs me on a moment's notice because they've forgotten something. So that's a great example where only checking your email twice a day, or turning off the pop-up notification that gives you the preview of who's emailing you about what subject, maybe create more anxiety than not. And so being aware. And so knowing what your role is in the organization should influence how you're managing your email. But you also need to be very honest in your assessment of urgency and in your assessment of that role. For instance, I have worked with administrative assistants over the years who only checked their email once an hour. And that was known. They made that very clear and very transparent. And so if an emergency situation came up, people in the organization knew how to contact that person, picking up a phone, walking over to their cubicle, so that you can have that same emergency response, or planning with that person in advance to say, I realize that typically you only check your email once an hour. I wanted to let you know that I'm concerned about an event that we're holding in the building today. So if you'd be willing, it would be really helpful if you might check your email more frequently today. So again, providing that context, that clarity, and being very upfront with the overall needs goes a long way to enhancing that productivity and creating a workable situation. I also would encourage you to think about that urgency from the perspective of how urgent are the items that come into your email. Now, this can be a dangerous question to pose because people feel very time pressed, urgent, everything is happening all the time. But a lot of times what will happen is people will use email to get you to answer their issue. Whereas if they would think about it for 10, 30, 50 minutes, they can actually solve their own problem. So you need to be very aware of what is that urgency level that you're creating, or how are you modeling behaviors and how you manage your email. So just being, again, an honest assertion. And then taking control. So some of the items that I had mentioned. A great way to take control, whether you do this on a permanent basis or simply when you're trying to focus on work that needs to be done, is turn off the pop-up. So that you don't have that notification, or turn off the dinger that might sound every time an email comes into your system. Doesn't preclude you from going in and checking it, but again, it doesn't draw you in or catch your attention in an unproductive way. Another opportunity is to check your email once an hour, and to become very disciplined and to create the habit that goes around with perhaps checking your email every 10 minutes before the hour, or in between meetings, or things of that nature. Another way to take control and manage your email is to simply consider taking a hiatus from it. Turn it off. When you go into a meeting, leave your phone face down, or leave your phone back in your office. Again, you can alert people, let them know that, and if you're assessing the urgency, you'll know whether or not that's something that you can do at that particular time. And along with that, another way to manage your email and take control is to reset expectations. If you would go back and do an audit of the email activity in your inbox for the past week, and do, again, that honest assessment of how many of these things actually needed to be handled within the hour versus within the day versus perhaps within a week, you can really get that sense for what are appropriate expectations to be had for how you respond and manage your email. And that can happen, again, resetting expectations on a personal level, resetting it on a team level, and resetting that organizationally. Particularly important when you are in that leadership capacity for the organization. How you handle your email will signal how others believe they think you want them to handle their email. So if you're emailing at 1 o'clock in the morning, they may think that's the expectation. And so in such an instance, setting up delayed delivery functions can be useful for that purpose. Or again, being very clear and transparent with your team and with your staff about why that's happening and it isn't your expectation of them. So that's really some of those tips for managing your email. Another really great technique that's used that has demonstrated progress in promoting personal productivity is the check-in and check-out. And so what that means is creating that list of what needs to be done, and then at the end of every day, taking 15 minutes and reflect on what was accomplished. What did you do during the day? What were the things that got done? Even what were the things that maybe didn't get done? And to capture that and to do that 15-minute journaling exercise. And the Harvard study that focused on this has demonstrated 22.8% higher performance in individuals who spent 15 minutes journaling at the end of each day. And what they were journaling about were accomplishments and progress that was made, productivity that was gained. And so when you're thinking about what you're getting done, you're also moving into the next chapter of that day's life in a positive frame of mind and in thinking about things that were advanced. It will signal then the list the next morning of, all right, I've gotten this done. Now what can we move on today? And so that prioritized list comes back to bear. You might pull in a Pomodoro technique to really focus on one of those plan or consider items, reflect on what's accomplished, and move forward. And during the study, one of the challenges that they found were people had a really hard time thinking that they weren't working in those 15 minutes, that doing this self-reflective journaling exercise was somehow taking time away from them being productive. And it was a need to shift that mindset and for leaders to reinforce the value of that 15 minutes of reflection so that you could ultimately gain greater performance and productivity in the long run. And so check in and check out on a daily basis can also be incredibly useful. So those were many of the personal productivity opportunities. And when we think about teams, a lot of that comes down to really reflection and reflecting on the progress that's been made. And so this is an opportunity for the individuals to reflect on their contributions to the team, and then for the team to do that as a group. And so with that, what's up on the slide is a series of questions that were developed through a Harvard Business School research project to get people to think about what were the events today that were the wins or the breakthrough. And again, that journaling activity that we talk about, marking achievements and progress, that's your opportunity here. In the same way, from a team perspective, to think about those small setbacks so that you're not ignoring them, you're not putting them below the surface, but really raising them to the top of the table so that they can be addressed moving forward. And then in this, you'll see a number of questions, and the slides will be made available to you, of looking at whether or not you thought that the team had clear goals. Did we have sufficient time? Did we understand our ownership? Did we give help as we were supposed to? And so within each category, it's what did I do? What did my team do? And how is that helping us to move forward? And these sorts of reflective exercises are really important to do because they also pull us out of the frenzy or the concern about actually moving things forward. It's an interesting way to take that time to stop, take a breath, open your mind to what's been happening, and then proceed with progress and setbacks. Can be something that you might also consider doing on a short, agile basis. Look at one section, take a quick break, go to the next section, take a quick break, go to nourishers, take a quick break, go to toxins, and then think about the whole collection of information. So really thinking about that overall reflection. From an organizational perspective, we think about focus for productivity. And when we talked earlier, that concept of really promoting purpose and focus on a longer term basis. The key for productivity at an organizational level is really understanding what work drives value at your organization. So there is a lot of things that go into moving an organization forward and moving a mission forward. And each organization really needs to understand what's driving value. And what that means is what's actually moving the mission in critical ways. And then you direct your employees to complete those tasks and to focus their personal productivity skills in those areas. And so that's an opportunity if you have work groups or committees within your nonprofit and employees or staff are involved in those committees, really assess how is the work of that committee or that work group driving value to the organization and moving the mission forward and helping to enhance overall effectiveness. And then if you discover that a committee is consuming an employee's time such that they're not actually completing their job tasks and responsibilities, then it's the opportunity for the leaders of the organization to really assess how that work group structure is influencing the ability of an employee to carry out their day-to-day responsibilities. Is it a lack of clarity of priority? Is it unclear communication about value? So you really, as an organizational leader, need to know what work is being done within your organization, what work is delivering value, and how are employees assigning their time and talents to the various tasks that are involved. And so that's from, again, a systems view of the organizational productivity. Also important to develop the dashboard so that it keeps you looking ahead. And so the dashboard is identifying what are those key things within the organization that of which we need to be aware. What do we need to keep our eye on the prize to look ahead so that we don't get stuck looking in the rearview mirror too much and crash into something? And also, what do we need to do to ensure that we can course adjust as the landscape changes. Do we need to slow down or speed up? And a dashboard, which is a visual representation of your organization's priorities and your progress against that, is a really great way to do that. So if you're looking for a dashboard, great examples available certainly on the internet. A Gantt chart from project management language would be another avenue to consider of thinking about mapping productivity and progress from an organizational perspective. Want to now just spend a few minutes on advancing accountability, and also encourage you to ensure you're using that chat function to send any questions that you might have or desired clarifications. So when we think about advancing accountability, that's critical for promoting productivity, because without accountability, it all falls apart. And so for shining that light on accountability, we'll bring back the three lenses or the three buckets from a personal, a team, and an organizational perspective. From a personal level, the way to shine some light on accountability is to have those weekly activity lists. These actually might be lists that you sit down with your supervisor or with a peer colleague, share the lists. Here's what we want to get done today. And here's what we want to get done this week. And then you can do that check-in with someone else, with your accountability buddy, to see what got in the way. What did we accomplish? What should we celebrate? What should we know has come up? One of the interesting things about sharing these weekly activity lists with a peer or another colleague, it's often an interesting way to surface if there are duplications happening throughout the organization, or if there are areas where you can swap resources or request additional resources because someone's not that busy that week and they'd love to help you out. So knowing what you want to get done in the week is a great place to start. Another opportunity for that personal accountability is certainly with performance reviews, and doing those on an informal as well as a formal basis. And so being accountable, really looking at setting out your annual goals. What do you want to accomplish for yourself and your productivity, for your organization, for your team? Coming up with 3 to 5 goals and some targets or milestone points, and then having those informal check-ins on progress. Great way to look at that at a personal productivity level. For team productivity, thinking about monthly success targets. I've had a lot of fun with this over the years with different groups, where at the beginning of the month, day 1 of the month, everyone comes together for 30 to 45 minutes and creates the list of this is what success looks like by the end of the month. This is what we want to have accomplished. And sometimes those are very singular, granular tasks. Other times it might be more of an idea or a thought that they want to put forward. But documenting it, putting on there who has lead for ensuring that that task or that project aspect is complete, posting it up and being very public about it, and then reviewing it at the next day 1 meeting. What did we successfully achieve? What might need to go into the next month? Why are we taking that one off our list if we didn't cross it off? So just doing those monthly reviews is really helpful from a team perspective. It's also helpful as a way to enhance your personal accountability for that performance review discussion. So you'll have a month-by-month documentation of accomplishments. Also for teams, having project briefings and debriefings. So the great way to have accountability for the team productivity is to do a briefing up front when something begins. Here's what we want to accomplish. Here's the roles and responsibilities. And then doing a debriefing upon completion of the project to see if you accomplished it and how those roles and responsibilities were kept intact or changed. Another team accountability item is looking at meeting summaries. So every time we get together in a meeting, that's a lot of time, money, and energy that's been invested in something. So a summary of that meeting is vital so that people remember what were the highlights of discussion and what were those key action items. And then the meeting summary becomes the trigger for the project coordinator or others to say, oh, that's right, I was supposed to do this or that. And then you can move that forward and bring it up at the next meeting. So those are a few ways to shine some light on accountability for a team. And at an organizational level, great opportunities to set semi-annual milestones, to create those more organizational initiatives or ideas and put them into what do we want to get done in the first 6 months? What do we want to get done in the second 6 months of whatever your operating year might be? And so to have those semi-annual milestones allows you to check in on things as well, so that you're not waiting until the end and realizing, oh my gosh, we didn't get this done. We have to panic and move things forward. Then also within that, having both a strategic framework and an operational plan. When we talked earlier about ensuring clarity of purpose, there's also ensuring that people are clear on their roles, their responsibilities, and what are the priorities of the organization. That's what the framework and the operational plan will do. It's that guiding light for individuals to determine how to allocate their own resources. And again, are we moving the organization forward in the way we intended? And that's where that dashboard comes in as a useful tool as well, to make sure that you're keeping your eye on risks that the organization might be facing, service statistics, and other things that, again, you said that you were going to do as an organization. So different ways in order to process that. So really, again, we want to make sure we have that opportunity to open it up for curiosities, desired clarifications, when you think about promoting productivity. And a key component when we think about promoting productivity is really impulse control. It's a really hard thing for us to particularly get our minds around today with the volume of stimulation that we have available to us and confronting us at all times. But a real leader is able to control those impulses to move something forward quickly, or to jump in on a project, or to reprioritize in a moment based upon something that may have been said in a hallway or a meeting. And so an effective leader is able to think about, I see this new impulse coming in, I see the need to have a task force formed on this issue about travel expenses, but a leader will step back, pause, and think about, how does that fit into the landscape of issues? Do we already have someone whose actual job it is to focus on that, or have we assigned someone to that project already? Because one of the things that happens within organizations is we'll be making progress on promoting productivity and enhancing accountability. And when a leader comes in and fails at impulse control, it can upset the whole apple cart. And so we want to make sure that we're role modeling at a personal level, reinforcing value for our teams, setting those organizational priorities, and then controlling our own impulses to go in and problem solve or to shift focus away from what actually needs to be done. So I would encourage you to go forward, think about ways that you might be able to employ pacing your priorities, finding your flow, managing your email, and really overall having a discussion within your organizations about what does productivity look like at a personal level, at a team level, and for the organization. For you are the leaders that can make that difference on a daily basis and over time, not only for yourself, but also for the people with which you work and the people that you serve through the mission of your nonprofit organization. So thank you for joining today for our Promoting Productivity installment of the 2016 Nonprofit Leadership Development Series. We have more series coming up, so we look forward to having you join us again in May. We'll be talking about strategy specifically and how to make that successful and sustainable as something you can use. So thank you again. With that, go forth, be more productive, hold up that accountability. And if you have any questions or clarifications that you would like, feel free to contact me offline. Be happy to answer questions or provide more resources.